Is United We Strike Radio on the International Community Radio Network. Don't buy, don't comply, ask why. UnitedWeStrike.com radio.
And you are listening to the United We Strike Radio Marathon for August of 2014. It's a little after 7 o'clock in the evening here on the East Coast of the United States. Whatever time of day it might be where you're listening, I bid you a good morning, afternoon, evening, or whatever. Hope you're having a pleasant weekend. We just heard from Larry Pinckney and Phil Restino, a very nice presentation. But now I would normally be introducing Susanne Posel and our friend Vinny Eastwood, all the way from across the big pond. But looks like Vinny's not going to make it today. But I do have Susanne, so please do stand by. I'm bringing her in now. Susanne, it's all yours, darling.
Oh, thank you. And I want you to stay with me.
Oh, you do you?
I do. Because I think you have a lot to offer with what I want to discuss.
Well, certainly.
All right. I saw in the news today, wrote an article about it, in Santa Cruz, California. They have decided that water-wasting residents will be sent to water school. Exactly.
Okay. And what qualifies somebody as a water waster?
Well, you have to...
I mean, occasionally I have to double flush. Now, I must admit, it's embarrassing, but, at my age, occasionally I have to double flush. Now, if I double flush, does that make me a water waster?
Yes, it does.
Oh, my God.
You have to be aware of the water resources and the sparsity. No hosing down your driveways, no filling up your swimming pools, no, quote, overwatering, end quote, your lawns. So I don't know what their definition of overwatering is.
I mean, is somebody going to come out with a hydrometer and measure the water content of my lawn?
Well, that's funny you should mention that, because in Sacramento, California, earlier this year, they had water patrols who were looking to crack down on wasteful residents during the height of the state drought. And they were sending out gentle reminders. They would administer up to $100 fines and sentence repeat offenders to water school. So Santa Cruz had their first water school, and the participants, or the unwilling participants, were there so that they would be in lieu of paying penalties or fines. So they went to water school, they learned how to conserve water, and now they're free to go ahead and use water because they've been trained on conservation, conserving resources, different ways to do so, description of the residents' water meters, and teaching them how to check for leaks and water leaks in their meters and their faucets, various things around the house and in the yard, so that they would know, now that they've been trained, on how to conserve.
Sin no more.
Exactly. Well, I thought about this idea.
I shouldn't be flip about it, because I mean, you have to pity the poor people out in California, because they have taken water resources for granted for so long. It's always been kind of a lush, vibrant area where a lot of our foodstuffs are grown. And, for about the last, 4, 5, 6 years, they've been, under pretty steady drought conditions. And the last couple of years, it's particularly severe. So, I don't want to make light of the fact that, they are short on water. But, when you start getting gray hairs in tennis shoes coming by, fining you for double flushing, at what point have we taken it too far?
Well, I started looking at the idea of conservation in general, and I noticed that one of their pamphlets looked a lot like the propaganda that was going around during World War II, when they were trying to get everyone to buy into the bond market and do this for your country, and women can do it too, with that woman with her arm. And so there's this picture that's this throwback, and it's not arbitrary. This imagery touches certain people's nerves, and that has to do with a generation. The things that the generation went through, not the ones current, but the generation before, the baby boomers, the generation before that. that when they look at this, it has a certain recognition, and it puts them into a certain state where the idea then is conservation. Well, of course you need conservation, because you have the baby boomers being raised by the silent generation who went through the Depression and had nothing, and then gave everything to their baby boomer children. However, as they got older throughout their life phases in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, became very staunch about conserving. And we need to have conservation because we need to make sure that there's enough resources for everyone. So I'm wondering how deep this social conditioning goes, because, it's one thing to send somebody to water school and teach them how to conserve. It's another thing when they invoke these generational ideologies that are instilled in us when we're children. And then as we become children and we go through our life, in our 20s we rebel against our parents' ideology and institutions. And then in our 30s, we start to come around a little bit. In our 40s, we then start to move toward a more conservative ideology. And in our 50s and 60s, we are actively in positions of major power. In our 40s is when we really come into our positions of power as far as making decisions and running corporations and being part of government. And as you get older, as you move toward a rose-colored look at how your parents were raised, then you try to recreate that ideology, or at least try to put it back into the social consciousness so you could have that again. I wonder if this idea of conservation is that playing itself back out as the baby boomers have moved from childhood through all the way into their later years.
Well, I tell you, as a kid, I used to make a pretty good living taking my wagon down the road and picking up pop bottles out of the gutter. There people back in the mid 60s were kind of flippant about, shall we say, environmental issues, and it was quite common for people to just, toss a pop bottle out the window of the car as they were driving out. And of course, young kids like me, at 2 cents a bottle, if you filled your wagons with bottle, that was not a bad living. I could make a couple of bucks on a Saturday afternoon just by collecting pop bottles out of the gutter of the road. So, there were two sides of the coin. There was this one side of the coin where people were just absolutely unconscious about environmental issues. And then there was this beneficial force. Well, at least that pop bottle the guy tossed out the window is worth 2 cents, and some industrious young kid like me is going to come along, grab that bottle, take it up to 7-Eleven for the refund. Well, I don't know what happened, but yes, I think the environmental consciousness of my generation kind of got full of itself. And we started thinking that, we know more about what's good for you than you do. And, instead of making economic incentives for people not to be wasteful with resources, they started implementing penalties. And our statutory law system supported that effort because, of course, a statutory legal system gets more power in a situation like that. And what does every bureaucrat want? A bigger budget and more power. So, yeah, I was an early member of the environmental movement. I did the very, very, very first Earth Day. I thought it was an important issue because I looked around and I said, we're being wasteful. We're being ridiculous. We are destroying the planet with our filth. It was I think, a noble endeavor at that time. Today, I'm not so sure. I think we've kind of slipped over that edge where we've taken it a little further than what's reasonable.
I would agree with you. I find it fascinating that the UN Population Fund had their conference on population control, their first conference on population control in 1974, which would put the baby boomers who just came out of the hippie culture and I think Charlie Manson sort of killed that. The party was over with that. And everyone kind of got shocked and went back to work. And you have this boom of industry in the 70s because of that. But you also have this idea that, whoa, we did this stuff in the 60s, and that was just way too much. Look what happened. I mean, the Manson murders were just that's what happens when you do that. And so the logical step then is to back away from that and start to become conservative. And I think that in the 70s, that's when that idea that, okay, well, we need to start thinking about what we did, how not to do that again. Is it cultural? Is it generational? How do we raise our children to never behave that way again? And then they have this idea in 1974 to introduce the idea of population control. Then by 20 years later, by 1994, they move into a new ideology, scratching the old, where the original idea of the UN Population Fund with population control was to find ways to get rid of people. Then they make this concerted effort to move into family planning and infant mortality and maternal mortality. So now the focus is on we have to save women, we have to empower women. And I remember when I was a kid in the late 90s or even in the whole decade, there was a real big movement to empower women. It was almost like a second women's lib, where my mother's generation burned their bras. There was another resurgence of that, where in my teen and my early 20s, there was a really big push to be a woman and be empowered and do it yourself and, carry the condom in your purse. Always make sure you have enough money to pay for your half of the dinner, even if he offers. Make sure you have enough money to get a cab or a way home. If he doesn't want to drive you, drive him yourself. Women's lib happening sort of all over again at the same time when they're moving toward controlling population and the ideology of controlling population through empowering women again and birth control. And you can control how many people are on this planet.
Yeah, but whenever they talk about population control, whenever they talk about reducing the surplus population, whenever they talk about those useful eaters, those of us who are listening just automatically assume that, well, surely I'm not on the list. I'm important. They wouldn't want to get rid of me. When in fact, I think most of us need to look in the mirror and say, hey, the target of depopulation, you're looking at them.
Oh, absolutely. I also think that this is an ideology that was implanted many generations ago with the silent generation into the baby boomers, where the silent generation now are in their 80s and 90s, and we've got like Henry Kissinger and David Rockefeller and George W.H. Bush, and these men are the last of that era where the idea was still that when we were kids we didn't have anything. The Depression happened and the World War II happened and we didn't have anything. And so the baby boomers then had so much, and as they grow older become stringent in what they have and how much they're willing to get rid of. And then it becomes a resurgence of that fear ideology that we have to conserve resources. We have to, because there was a time when we didn't have any resources. There were times when I went hungry. There were times when there were no clean clothes and no clothes that fit, and we lost our house and there was no house to have. That can't ever happen again. And so the construct of that psychology has sort of gone to the nth degree, like the speedometer has gone all the way to that farthest point that it could possibly go. Is as the baby boomers are coming into their 50s, 60s, and 70s, and even late term or early term Generation Xers are starting to become very conservative and conserve. We've got to take care of this stuff. We've got to keep this stuff, because if we don't hold on to it, we're not going to have enough. And there's that fear that keeps perpetuating or showing itself in every generation. It keeps rearing its ugly head. And I think that with this, what's going on in California, and using that propaganda picture of this woman from World War II kind of going, oops, that's a lot of water. Oh, well, that speaks to multi-generations. And even now, with the movements and protests that have gone on, we've seen a lot of throwback to that era when nationalism was good and coming together for a solid ideology was what we should do, and that was the American way, and we all band together and push for this thing.
Well, where is it going to end? To be honest with you, I think the World War II imagery is purposeful. I think there is a move right now to kind of get us in a mode that makes us more accepting of the fact that war is inevitable and we just have to go kill Russians or Chinese or Iranians or whoever they decide is the boogeyman of the week. And I think that the imagery that you're talking about from World War II and the propaganda techniques that were rampant during World War II, I think they're being used on purpose. I think it's kind of like if somebody did a rerun of Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In today. I think I'd probably still laugh at it, even though by today's standards it looks kind of tame.
It's funny because everything comes back into fashion, and propaganda does the same thing. With every third generation, you start to see 3 generations back that propaganda coming back through again. It's not just the shoes, and don't just keep your bell bottoms because they'll come back into style.
I'm still waiting for my Nehru jacket to come back in style. I've had that thing since 1972, and it's still not back in style. What happened?
Do you still have your members only jacket?
But of course. I think I finally threw away the bell-bottom jeans that were, they had a waist on them, I think about 30 inches, and I don't fit that anymore.
Oh, no. It's
sad
funny
but true.
I see this also in the way in which we choose to medicate ourselves. Supplements, there's a very big push now to eat healthy and to take supplements. However, my cousin, who's about 52, she's late boom, early X, and she knows that she should be eating healthy. She understands that genetically modified foods are bad for you and what they do to you and what pharmaceuticals do to you. But when she gets sick, she goes right for the traditional doctor knows best pharmaceuticals. When she becomes depressed, she goes right to the antipsychotic. She doesn't even question what she's eating or how she's dealing with her stress or the possibility that she could just choose and relearn and rewire her brain to react to things differently and it wouldn't have the same side effects as the pharmaceuticals do. I find that very interesting because when I had my children, and going through both pregnancies and the problems that I had with the pediatricians, that propelled me to become holistic and treat the children at home and treat myself and my husband at home because I almost died having both children unnecessarily. It was ridiculous if I had passed away because it would have been stupid. With my first pregnancy, the doctor didn't tell me that I was preeclamptic during the entire pregnancy, and I ended up having eclampsia and going through seizures. With my daughter, it was just negligence on the part of my OBGYN. I developed cellulitis because she didn't treat the infection. She ignored the infection and then restapled my C-section, so it sealed the wound. So I ended up admitting myself into surgery within less than 48 hours. Both of those, and then my son having febrile seizures and horrible reactions to the vaccines, that was enough. The medical community has no purpose in my life. However, just my mother coming in and out of surgeries, my father coming in and out of surgeries, doctor knows best. Yes, I understand that this might be healthy for me, that might be healthy for me, but then my mother and my father joke around about Dr. Atkins, and at one point he was saying, oh, meat and potatoes, that's all you got to eat, and then in the next point he's saying, no carbs, they're bad for you, don't eat that, and that's two completely different ideologies on what your body needs to be healthful within that one generation. I think that kind of messed up their concept and understanding and perspective of what food is and what its purpose for us is.
Yeah, the food thing drives me crazy. You know, I still can't figure out whether oatmeal is going to help me or hurt me. I just, you know, because one day it's one thing, the next day, you know, and I grew up eating bacon and eggs. Now, oh God, all the vegetarians out there just had heart failure. But, you know, I grew up thinking that, you know, bacon and eggs is the breakfast of champions, you know, and I thought that was normal. That's what you're supposed to eat. And then, of course, you know, bacon and eggs are going to kill you. What? Okay, so I eat oatmeal because oatmeal's supposed to be good for me, right? And then they change their mind on that. You know, sometimes I think, you know, a lot of this food stuff is fads. Now, okay, on the GMOs, you know, I know your point of view on it is that there should be no GMOs. My point of view on it is I at least want to see it on the label. Let me decide, okay? I figure I'm an intelligent consumer, and if you really, 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 as a vendor, think that GMO product is so good for me, you ought to put in big, bold letters, contains this new, great, fantastic GMO gizmo. And let me decide, as the consumer, whether I wish to support you, whether I wish to vote with my dollar. The idea that they would slip it in on me without even telling me, the idea that the Wheaties that I thought was good for me as a kid is now some kind of chemical concoction that doesn't even resemble what I used to eat, that bugs the living daylights out of me. But, you know, being something of the libertarian, you know, I would pass no law. If they got a GMO product and they think it's so good, they should be out there bragging about it. They shouldn't try and slip it in on me like a fool.
Well, we have things like, have you heard of native advertising?
I haven't heard of it that specifically. I might have heard of it under a different name.
Well, this is really incredible stuff, folks. And, you know, it's talked about all the time, but this is actually an active new trend in advertising. These companies get with BuzzFeed, New York Times, Forbes magazine, The Atlantic, there's a couple others I can't remember right now, and they write articles. These publications write articles that are just a huge commercial.
Okay, so instead of an article, you're reading an infomercial.
Yes, and it is written, tailored as if it were an actual news article and placed on the website amongst other news articles as if it were a news article. And the people who are supporting this, obviously the marketers and the publishers, because they're getting paid for this and it's quite a bit of money, they're saying that it's not chicanery. It's marketers and publishers getting together and sharing storytelling tools in order to better market to the consumer. So it's not BS. It's reconstituted bovine waste.
You know, I remember back as a child, I remember reading some article at some point or another about how when you went to the drive-in movie theater, and yes, I come from an era when you actually went to drive-in movies, but that's neither here nor there. Okay, so I'm old. But, you know, when you'd go to the drive-in movie, they would insert these subliminal advertisements in the movie that you were watching that just got you so excited about going up to the drink stand to get a drink and some popcorn. And, you know, and this came out and everybody, you know, and supposedly there were laws passed where you could not do this subliminal advertising because that was evil. And, you know, frankly, now that I think about it, it was kind of underhanded. And I think that, you know, these advertisements placed as if they were articles, that annoys me about as much as the idea of the subliminal advertisement. Now, Susanne, I've got to caution you. We're coming up on. We've only got about 3 minutes left in this segment, so you know it's probably a good idea if you think in terms of a wrap up and perhaps a little bit of blatant self promotion.
Okay. Well, go to OccupyCorporatism.com. That's my headline news website. I post it 6 days a week, about 4 or 5 articles a day. I also have the U.S. Independent, which is 26 contributors and many guest contributors every week. Good sourced, evidenced information, because I don't know if you noticed, but I'm trying to bring honest, integral journalism back, what it was intended to be, and that's what I'm doing with the U.S. Independent and OccupyCorporatism.com. And Vinny, who should have been here, but I think he's sick, so that's why he didn't show up. You can catch Vinny at thevinnyeastwoodshow.com. And is there anything else? How much time do I have? I have seconds, right?
Oh, no, you've got a whole minute. You got a minute to burn.
I've got a minute to burn.
Wow.
Well, it fascinates me, and the theme that I was trying to get at today was these concepts are not new. They're just repackaged. And the reason why they get repackaged is because they work. They work the first time, they work the second time, they work the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time. If we're paying attention to the patterns and the ways in which they are repackaging these same ideas to get these outcomes out of the generations so that they'll make the decisions that they want us to, if we pay attention to how they're doing it, then we can consciously choose whether or not we want to continue to participate. And that would be a generation that would actually help to stop all of this insanity that's happening. Just think about it.
An excellent piece of advice there. Susanne, I want to thank you so much for your participation in the United We Strike Marathon, and I guess I'll be talking to you just momentarily as we open our roundtable, but that's our time for today.
Thank you.
You have a good evening. Good night.
This is United We Strike Radio on the International Community Radio Network. Don't buy, don't comply, ask why. UnitedWeStrike.com radio.